tough time. So I'm always going to wear my mask. I can take it off if you promise that all the germs will stay out there. But since we can't promise that, so please forgive me for wearing my mask up here. I believe that each one of us can say that life is full of heartaches and headaches and troubles and trials. I'm sure that, we each have tasted that in our lifetime. But even through all that, I still believe that God has blessed each one of us, you and myself, at some point in your life and my life. And one of the greatest blessings that God has allowed me to experience is the blessing of being a grandfather. My dad, I believe he was a godly man. He was one of the pioneers of the Adventist church in the islands. And he passed away. He never had this experience. Because none of us had children when he passed away. He was 54. And because I knew him, there's no doubt in my mind he'd be a great grandfather. And because I know my children and I knew my dad, I know my children would have loved him. But for some reason that only God knows, being a grandfather was not part of his journey here. But we just have to trust God because, he said to his people in the Old Testament, and he's speaking to us today too. In Jeremiah 29:11, a lot of you memorized this. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. So from my experience as a grandfather, for our grandchildren, I feel like I was robbed or missed out on a great blessing when I was little. And at the same time, I also feel like my grandparents also missed out on such a great blessing, that they could have had. You see, I didn't know my grandparents on my dad's side. I actually met my grandfather once when I was little. Only one time. But I never met my grandmother. This is on my dad's side. But on my mom's side, I did spend time with my grandmother and also my grandfather. But when I was born, I was growing up, they had already been separated. They had already been remarried, and they lived on separate islands. But I still spent a few years with my grandmother living in the same house. And then we moved to the island where my grandfather was, and built our house right next door to his. So we were able to see him. But throughout all this time, I never had experience that I have now and I see today between grandchildren and grandparents. There were some times that I occasionally would talk with my grandfather, but we never had the kind of conversation like one that I would have with Jesse. And I think there are a couple of things that distributed to that. First of all is the culture, and second is the social structure there that is based on age. That means the older you are, the more power you have, the more important you are. So in that system, children are the least important people in that system. As a matter of fact, in the Samoan culture, like if the adults were talking in a room and a kid joins in, someone is going to hit you or to tell you to be quiet, and you don't. It's very disrespectful in the culture for that to happen. So I believe that is the other reason. When I met Sue, her first grandchild is Josie, and she was about 1.5 years. Her parents are Tavis, who is Sue's second oldest son, and his wife Bethany. We had the blessing of babysitting Josie. And some of you from the Gresham Church remember when we brought this little girl to church. We even brought it when we had socials, and a lot of people got to know and love her. Well, sometimes we took her to the park too. So from that, we discovered something, that we really love being grandparents. So when Jesse came along, I tell you that I felt like this grandfather thing just went up a notch. And then 3 days after Jesse was born, Josie's parents had twins, Violet and Ben. We felt so blessed. In 1 week we went from 1 grandchild to 4. It's almost like God said, "Oh yeah, you like grandchildren?" But one thing I thought was, man, every grandchild should have a grandparent or a great-grandparent around. So I knew that the Miller grandchildren will be fine because they were living with both of their grandparents on mom's side. Plus they also had great-grandparents from grandma's side and great-grandparents from grandpa's side who all lived here in Portland. They also had a great-grandma from their dad's side that lives in Modesto, California, and she's been up here a few times. But for the Pasi grandchildren, Sue and I were it. Because Frey's Jesse's dad, his parents lived in American Samoa, and Janae's mom and grandparents, they all passed away. Then when Wheeler came along, it was just a whole different feeling. But by this time, we felt like we were getting pretty good at this. There were challenges too that came up. But it's just amazing how God made each one of us and our grandchildren very unique. When Cardine came along, he had his own personality and things that made him unique too. He was a lot calmer than the other two, but he seemed to have a temper. I think God allowed me to be a grandfather because there was a lot I needed to learn about life and about being a Christian. We didn't spend much time with the Miller grandchildren as we did with the Pasi's, and that's because we lived with the Pasi's grandchildren. And then even when they moved out of the house, they still came by to visit more often. But we all get together, the Millers and the Pasi, on all the major holidays. So we got to see everybody. All our grandchildren call Sue Grandma. For me, our Miller grandchildren call me Grandpa, but the Pasi grandchildren call me Papa. I am grateful with both names. Now I'm grateful to God for the blessing of being a part of their lives. You know, sometimes when we think about people that God allows to cross our path, we think about the important people or the older people, but it also includes all the little people that God allows. Now there's a song, if we have time at the end, we're going to play it. It was played here, I think, when Carol one time was telling a story, and I'm sure a lot of you know the song. It's called Sermon in Shoes. And I remember when I was little in Samoa with the children's division, we used to sing that song, but we never sang, "Do you know, O Christian, you're a sermon in song." We always sing, "Do you know, O children, you're a sermon in song." And that's what this message today is all about. You may have seen the comings and the goings email or in the bulletin that the title of our sermon this morning is 7 Little Preachers. What I'm sharing with you this morning is how each of our grandchildren has blessed me in my spiritual walk. Now, if you ask Grandma Sue or their parents or the other grandparents and great-grandparents, they might have something else that they noticed that's different from what I'm sharing. But what I'm sharing this morning is the things that they have blessed me with. Excuse me. You know, they have blessed me with and taught me a lot. I'm just trying to figure out here, because of our time, how I'm going to navigate this. But anyway, so the sermon, the 7 Little Preachers, it's the 7 preachers is our 7 grandchildren. And I say preachers because they preach to me these messages. And I'm going to start from the youngest and end with the oldest. 7 Little Preachers. Now, first little preacher is Hunter. You can see their whole name and their how old they are up there. Hunter is going to be 3 in December. His parents are Tyler and Amelia. The story of his birth itself is full of spiritual lessons. Some of you already know the story, but I'm just going to give you a condensed version, especially for those who didn't know. When Hunter showed up, no one was ready for him. And when I said no one, that included his parents. Amelia was not feeling well one day, so Tyler went to the store to buy some flu-type medication. And when he got home, he heard Amelia screaming. And when he went in and went to the bathroom, he said he saw a lot of blood all over the place. Amelia went to use the bathroom, and she had the baby in there. And it's not because the baby was born too early. That's not why they were surprised. It's because none of us, including Tyler and Amelia, knew that Amelia was pregnant. She never had those signs and symptoms of pregnancy. She never felt any baby kicking in her stomach. She never gained the weight that you normally see. So that's why it was a surprise. As a matter of fact, both of them had told their moms that they didn't want any kids. But this little preacher had other plans. He said, ready or not, I'm here. That's the short version of the story. But there's so much spiritual lessons that we can learn from there. But Hunter's sermon, for me, that I want to share with you, comes from his very first Christmas. He was only 10 days old on his first Christmas. And one of the things that Sue and I had talked about, we had had 9 Christmases and we had a lot of holidays together, the Millers and the Pasi. Is that when we get together, it seems like all the Millers congregate on this side of the house and all the Pasis on this side. And you know, we talk about that, and I can understand that, because if you go to a party, you usually look for people that you are familiar with and go sit with them. But you know, in my heart, I've always wished that it was different, that you know, that we just all mingled together. But on Hunter's first Christmas, I saw something different. Everyone seemed happy and talking to everyone. I see people get up and go change seats, and people were just mingling together and talking and smiling. You know, a few days or days later, 2 of my 3 girls told me that Christmas was our best Christmas ever. And like I said, we had 9 Christmases together before this. And they said it was because everyone was so excited to see the baby. You know, my mind went straight to Hunter's text for his sermon. Matthew 5:13. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Sue tried some recipes with low salt or no salt, because I'm on a low sodium. They put me on a low sodium diet. And there's one dish, we've always made it, we loved it. You know, it's called porcupine meatballs. It's not made from porcupines, it's just rice in the meatballs that makes it look like a porcupine. But we've always loved this. But Sue made it with no salt. And let me tell you, it was so bad. I mean, we tried to eat it, and you know, I ate it because, you know, I respect my wife, and she took the time, and plus, the only reason why she didn't put any salt is because of my diet. So, you know, I had to eat it. But I only ate it at one time. Then we had leftovers. We always eat leftovers, but I never touched it again. Now, Sue did later, you know, she put barbecue sauce and soy sauce and all kinds of stuff. But, you know, it was bad. But that's what salt does, you know. It makes food taste good. It changes the taste and it gives food flavor. And that's why Jesus said, you know, you are the salt of the earth. You know, Hunter being there, that one Christmas, changed the atmosphere and the mood for the better for our family. You know, what Jesus told his disciples then, he's telling us today too. You know, Is your presence where you are making things good or better? You know, is your job better because you're there? Is your church better because you're there? What about your home? Is your home better, or your family better because you're there? Or are things better off without you there? These are some serious questions. You know, 10 days old Hunter didn't even know that he preached a very powerful sermon to me. That's why I wanted to share his story. Our next little preacher is Carl D. His parents are Fraze and Janae. You know, I'm so proud of him carrying my name as his middle name. He had a rough start because his mentors were Jesse and Wheeler. One thing both his parents told me early in life was, they said, Cardine had a temper. You know, I didn't want to tell them, you know, what do you expect with a kid with the middle name Pinati? Because I didn't want them to change his middle name. But I agreed with them. He had a temper. There's a video on Facebook, I think it's still on Janae's page. When Cardine was very little, and he came to the room, and he opened the door. He was mad at Janae for something. He opened the door and gave Janae the look, and then he slammed the door. It seemed like he was walking down the hall. And just a few seconds later, the door opened again. And he gave his mom the look again. And he slammed the door again, as if to make sure that Janae knows that he's mad. You know, it was just funny when I saw that, you know. He's so little, but he had this attitude. So obviously, that was not his sermon. You know, I've always been impressed about his athletic ability. When I see him do exercises, he does it with ease. When he was only 6, he can do one-handed cartwheels. Well, try that. One-handed. It was like so easy for him to do just one hand. And when we used to go watch the soccer games, I remember watching him the whole games. He's just running up and down the field. He never seemed to get tired. But that made me think of another verse that a lot of you also memorized. Isaiah 40, verse 31. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. You know, some translations say those who wait upon the Lord. This translation says those who hope in the Lord. What it really means is those who put their trust in the Lord. Those who don't put their trust in themselves, but put their trust in the Lord. You know, this can be fulfilled physically, but it's really about our spiritual condition. It's why Jesus said in John 15, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me, you will bear much fruit. But without me, you can do nothing. So I hope Cardine will remain healthy and in good condition physically, but more importantly, that he will put his trust in the Lord. And that is the appeal of Cardine's sermon for each one of us too this morning. Our third little preacher is Wheeler. Wheeler is the last part of her first name. and she's named after her great-grandma. The word Fa'awila, the whole name in Samoan, means to electrocute. But just the last part, Wila, can be translated into three things, three words. Wila means electricity. Wila means lightning. And it's also the word that's used for a bicycle. Wila is Shayna's daughter. And people in our family know that that means more than just giving birth to her. You know the phrase, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree? Wila is like a carbon copy of Shayna when she was little. All the things that Shayna used to do when she was little, Wila does that. You know, it's funny, one day I was talking to my oldest daughter, Christina, and she was saying that she was talking with Shayna one day, and Shayna said, man, Willa doesn't listen, you know. And she starting to talk back to me. And Christina said, she laughed and said, Shayna, that's you when you were little. You know, I remember Shayna used to cut her own hair when she was little. If she gets a hold of the scissors, she would cut her own hair and also cut her doll's hair. Well, guess what? Wheeler did that too. Now, there's a spiritual lesson there. But Wheeler's sermon comes from a conversation between her and her grandma Sue. Every year when it's close to Christmas, Sue has this interview with her grandchildren. You know, she asks them questions like, what's your favorite color? What games or activities do you like? What kind of toys and all that. So when Wheeler was 6 years old, Sue asked her what she wanted for Christmas. And Wheeler said, a Hatchaball. And Sue asked, what's that? And Wheeler said, look it up. You know, we had a good laugh. And since then, you know, we kind of, anytime one of us asked about something, the other one would say, look it up. I remember hearing Sue telling somebody this story. And Sue said, I couldn't believe a 6-year-old telling me to look it up. And I thought of a text that would be Wheeler's main text for her sermon. It's from the story of Paul. A lot of you know that. It's in Acts 17. You know, it was his custom that he goes to the synagogue on Sabbath and was preaching and proclaiming Jesus as the Messiah. And then some of the Jews that didn't like it put a mob together that started a riot and led to the arrest of many of the Christians there. But the believers sent Paul and Silas away at night, and they went to Berea. That's where Wheeler's text comes from. Acts 17, verse 11. Now the Berean Jews were of more noble character than those in Thessalonica, for they received the message with great eagerness and examined the scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true. See, there are many people, or shall I say, many Christians, that don't take time to read the Bible and search the scriptures for themselves. I remember one time I was watching a Christian comedian. He was telling about, he went to this church, trying to find a good church to go to. So he went to this church and he sat down when it was time for the pastor to preach. He said every time the pastor mentioned a scripture during his sermon, he could hear and see everybody flipping their Bibles, the pages. And he thought, man, nobody believes this dude. It's like they're all checking out if what he's saying is true. You know, the main point of Wheeler's sermon is read the scriptures for yourself. Search the scriptures. Don't just take somebody's word for it. Next up is our fourth little preacher, Benjamin. Most of us just call him Ben. His parents are Tavis and Bethany, same parents with Josie that I mentioned at the beginning. Ben has a twin sister that will be our next preacher. I remember the day the twins were born. Sue and I were with the family, some of the family waiting in the waiting room. And I remember that there was a time, a moment that it was intense and uncertain, because after both babies came out, they said that Ben wasn't breathing. And I remember their great-grandma, Phyllis. I can see she was like so distressed and worried. We all privately prayed that God would help Ben to breathe. And we praised God, because a little later, Ben started breathing. And like I said earlier, we didn't spend much time with the little grandkids. We did the Pasi. It wasn't until they were a little older. When they were little, usually Sue would go there sometimes to help Bethany with the twins. But as far as us babysitting all of them, that didn't happen until they were a little older. I don't remember if I shared this part with Sue, but as we got to know him better, I felt that I needed to be a little more careful with Ben, about what I say and how I say it, compared to his sister. I felt that Ben was more sensitive and he can get upset easier than his sister. But it was like a whole different picture coming from the other way. I noticed from the start that Ben didn't seem to have any problem warming up to me and getting used to me compared to his sister. And then when they were able to talk, they usually just say, Grandpa. But I remember the first time Ben said, Grandpa Pinati. It was when he said the prayer before we ate, when we had the big house. And that was special to me. It wasn't that long ago, too, that we were watching all the 3 Miller grandkids where we are now. And when it was time to go, they all went outside, took all their stuff with Sue. And then, I was still sitting in the living room. All of a sudden, the door opened again. And Ben just came in and said, Bye, Grandpa. That meant a lot to me. Then, the next time they came over, the same thing happened. But when they were walking out, I told Sue that I was going to the bathroom. And Sue came back and said, Ben was going to come in and say bye to you, but I told him you're in the bathroom. I know that everyone is different, especially for children. And I don't love Josie and Violet any less. But those little things that Ben did meant so much to me. There is a great lesson there too, but that's not Ben's sermon that I wanted to share with you. There were times when the kids come over for us to watch. They had all eaten, or their parents had taken them out to eat before they come. But there were also times when they come, Sue had to make food for them. One time, Sue made meatballs because Bethany said all the little kids like meatballs. When it was time for dinner, Sue served the food. Ben only ate rice and he wanted ketchup with the rice. When Sue asked him about the meatballs, he said it was the wrong color. And then there was another time when they came over And Sue made breakfast sandwiches, kind of like the McDonald's sandwiches. You have the meat and then the cheese on it. And you know how sometimes even with the burgers, you put cheese and it melts, and some of the cheese hang over on the side? Yeah. Well, Ben told Sue that she ruined the sandwich. And he didn't eat it.
Typical kid.
It might sound funny to us, but there's a great lesson there. Ben's main scripture for his sermon is Romans 12:2. This is the New Living Translation. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. You don't have to, just because everybody still eats the sandwich with those chicken, you don't have to. You stick with your own standards. And the rest of the verse is, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. One of the reasons why people hesitate to accept Christianity is because in their observation and their experience, from the Christians they know and are close to, there's no difference between them and the other people. But God's people, God's children, Christians should be different. It's always been that way in the Old Testament for God's people, in the time of Jesus and what he taught, and even in the time of the end. In Revelation 18, you have that call, to God for his people that are all mingled with the fallen Babylon or the world. God says, come out of her, my people. There's a quote that I love that says, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. But that was from Oscar Wilde. He was an Irish poet from the 1800s. As a Christian, I must make sure that that quote just means I shouldn't try to be like somebody else. But you don't want people, you don't even yourself, to be yourself. We want to be like Jesus. Don't compromise your Christian principles and standards to fit in with everybody else. Be a part of the crowd. That is Ben's appeal from his sermon. Our fifth little preacher is Violet. It took a while for Violet to warm up to me, even to speak to me. But to be fair to her, if I were a little girl, it would take time too for me to warm up to me. In the early part of our relationship, I remember I went to Sue's house before we were married. I was wearing all black, even had a black beanie. And I remember Sue told me later that one of the boys' girlfriends asked her, are you sure he's not a gangster? So I can understand why Violet took a little while to start talking to me. She was also very observant. One time they came to our house, and she came up the stairs, and when she got up there, she asked Sue, how come you guys don't vacuum your stairs? And Sue said, we do, we vacuum our stairs. And Violet said, no, because those were the same things that I saw the last time we were here. From then on, there's a lesson, spiritual lesson there in this whole thing. But from then on, when we know the little grandkids would say, are coming over, I always say,
please don't come
well,
back.
we need to make sure we vacuum our house, because Violet will know. But Violet's sermon comes from a story that her mom told us in one of our get-togethers for the holidays. we were talking about the gifts and the kids. And Bethany said, Violet is happy with whatever she gets. She doesn't care how many gifts the other kids have or what they have. She's happy with whatever she has. And I noticed that she carries that attitude over to when we play games. She doesn't care if she wins or not. She's just happy that she was part of the game. So, the title of Violet's sermon to me is Contentment. Her main text is Philippians 4:11 and 12. This is the New Living Translation. Not that I was ever in need, for I have learned how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned the secret of living in every situation. Remember that. Whether it was a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little. You know, when we are content with what we have, we won't covet other people's possessions. We won't be jealous if somebody else has something better than what we have. And I think because most of us memorize the next verse, verse 13, where it says, for I can do everything through Christ who strengthens me. I think that's the reason why we miss Violet's message. But Paul, like I said, to notice, he says, he knows the secret, and this is the secret in this verse, that he can do everything because of Christ. That's the message from this little preacher. We have a couple more, please be patient with me. Number 6 is Jesse. Jesse's here. Jesse is Praise and Janae's son. He's Garvine's older brother. I remember when Jesse was little, I felt like a whole different phase of my life had just begun. I was so happy that Praise and Janae named their first baby Jesse. Because at that time, it had been 8 years and 18 days since my only son, Jesse, passed away. He was 20. And I was thinking when he passed away that there were things I thought about that I wished I had a chance to do for him or with him. Now God has given me a chance to do those things. I also thought about things that I could have done better in the 20 years of life that God blessed my son with. Now I have a second chance to do them again. You know, if I spend a little more time with this little preacher, it's because Jesse's birth had a lot more meaning to me than just being my first grandson. I had just gone through some toughest trials in my life. It was just 3 years before since Janae's mom passed away, age 43, from breast cancer. So that means Jesse won't have a grandma because Fraser's parents lived in American Samoa. Also, I was only 55 at the time, but I had already left the workforce and retired on a disability from end-time renal disease. But God and His amazing grace once again proved His love for me, because it was only 8 months before when He blessed me with Sue. So that means Jesse now will have a grandma around. For the past 10 years, I'm talking about right now, I've seen how much Sue loves Jesse and how much Jesse is close and loves Sue. You know, just one time, Jesse and I were playing golf and it was boring. And Jesse hit the ball, I would say at least 70, 80 yards from away. And it landed on the green and it almost went in. And he was jumping up and down. And he said, "Papa, did you see that?" And I said, yes, man, that's an awesome shot. And Jesse said, "I wish Grandma was here to see that." You know, I was thinking, I'm you. But, you know, also when Jesse was born, it was only 2 months and 13 days since God blessed me with a brand new kidney. You know, my donor was 10 years younger than me. I always love to bring that 10-year thing because every time Sue brings the age thing in a conversation where I'm older than her by 4 years, I always remind her that she is 6 years older than my kidney. You know, this past Wednesday, Sue and I went to my kidney appointment, and he said, "This June will be 12 years since your transplant." And he said that my kidney is perfectly fine. He said, if I have any problems, you know, coming up, it will be maybe the heart or the diabetes or something else, but it won't be the kidney. You know, when they check my A1C, a lot of you know what that is. It shows how good you're doing controlling your blood sugars. It was 6.7. That was the best I ever had since I was diagnosed with diabetes in 1992. It had never gotten that low. You know, there was so much more about the birth of Jesse that affected my life, my Christian walk. I remember when he was little, I couldn't wait for him to grow up enough so we can have conversations and go play golf with me. I felt like it was my responsibility and obligation to make sure that no one would ever hurt or harm Jesse. And I remember Shayna and Janae were telling me that I'm overprotective and I was spoiling Jesse. But they don't know that I felt there's a task I was given and how far I was willing to go to protect him. I still remember the first time Jesse walked. We were at camp meeting at Blackstone. Samoans always have this spot where everybody meets. And all of a sudden, he just stopped walking down. I always remember that. There were a lot of family and friends that witnessed that. There were many spiritual lessons that God, through Jesse's life, taught me. You know, we loved Sunday mornings because Sue doesn't have to work. There's no church. There are no doctor's appointments, so we could sleep a little longer. But I remember when Jesse was a little, like 2 or a little older, he would wake up early Sunday morning, around 6 o'clock, never fails. Then he would come down and lays on the carpet and tries to put his mouth under our door. And he would call, "Papa, open the door." I tell you, if that was somebody else, they'd be in big trouble. But because it's Jesse. You know, Jesse's sermon that I chose to share with you is from about 2 years ago. We were on our way to play golf in Boring in my truck. We had gotten off, those of you that are familiar with that area, we'd gotten off on Highway 30 on Stone Road. Then we were on 282nd. And Jesse said, "Papa, that truck is really close to us." I didn't realize it, but when I looked up at the rear view mirror, this guy was so close, it was like he was almost attached to our bumper. And I said, wow, that is close. And Jesse said, what are you going to do, Papa? I said, well, I can just step on the brakes really hard so he can hit us. And it will be his fault when the police come. And Jesse said, Papa, isn't that a bad thing to do? Let me tell you, that hit me harder than if that truck hit us. I thought, shouldn't it be the other way around? Where Jesse was going to do something bad and I'm asking him what he's asking me? I felt bad, and I told Jesse, yes, it was. It was a bad thing to do. I was so ashamed of myself. When we got home, I told Sue, what happened. There are many scriptures that came to mind that could be the main text for Jesse's sermon for me. Like the one from Psalms that says, out of the mouths of babes. But I chose the one from Galatians chapter 6, verse 1. This is the New Living Translation. Especially the first part. If another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back into the right path. Paul says each one of us who is a believer has an obligation to help a brother or a sister when he or she goes astray. But there is a little qualifier in there. He says, you who are godly. But notice, it doesn't say, you who don't have any sins. There's a big difference. But what a powerful sermon that Jesse preached to me that day. I was thinking the money that I spent for his golf lessons was well worth it. And I hope Jesse's sermon will speak to you too. This is our last preacher, last little preacher. Josephine. Okay. We just call her Josie. Her parents are Tavis and Bethany. She is Violet and Ben's older sister. As a matter of fact, she was the one that told us about her siblings before they were born. One day she came to our house with her parents when we were living downtown, and after a little while she was still running around with a jacket, and Sue said, take the jacket off. So Sue went to help her because it was warm in the house. And all of a sudden, Sue got so excited and was making all the sounds and expressions of somebody that was incredibly happy. She looked at Josie's shirt she was wearing inside. In the front it said, I'm an older sister. Sue looked at Tavis and Bethany, and they were both smiling. And then we shared some congratulations and joyful moments together. She was 1.5 years when I met Sue. I remember the first time I saw her. She has the blonde hair, blue eyes, and pretty face. I told Sue, she looks just like those baby dolls from the store. And even though she was not biologically my granddaughter, she gave me my first taste of what it was to be a grandfather. And I loved her just like my own. She was Sue's first grandchild, so we babysat her more times. We took her to the park, and like I said, to the church. And just like the first 6 preachers, Josie taught me a lot of spiritual lessons. From the time she started talking, She was like way more mature than her age was. I remember one time we were at their house and we're celebrating somebody's birthday. I don't quite remember correctly whether it was her dad or her dad's three brothers, her uncles, that said something that wasn't nice or inappropriate, and Josie corrected them. And I remember one of the adults, I think it was he was either the great grandma or one of the grandmas said, now who's the adult in this conversation? You know, one time after they just rebuilt the Gresham McDonald's, we were all there, the other grandkids, the Pasi grandkids. They were all playing, it was loud, and all of a sudden Josie came to our table. She had tears in her eyes, and she told Susan, there are no rules posted anywhere. She said they should have rules to protect, the kids and for the kids to follow. And then she also said, and Willa does not listen at all. And I remember Sue telling her that she should write or call somebody about posting the rules. But I don't remember what Sue said about Willa because, Willa is Willa. So I don't know if it was because of Josie or they ordered the rules and they weren't there. Like I said, they just rebuilt it. But the next week when we went there were rules posted in there. There was also another time not that long ago in our current home when we were babysitting all the three Miller kids, and and Ben and Violet got into a fight, not physically, but Josie took Ben to the guest room and talked to him about it. Then she came to the living room and talked to Violet about it. See, all these things about Josie could be sermons. But a sermon that I chose to share this morning with you is from a story that her mom told us. Bethany said that there was a girl that Josie knows from school one day, and Bethany was talking about her, and she mentioned that she was Simone. And Josie said, oh, she's Simone? And her mom said, yes. And Josie said, just like us. We were laughing, and Sue said, Josie figured since Grandpa was Simone, then we are all Simones too. Only through the eyes and the mind of a child. No wonder why Jesus said in Josie's first text, found in Matthew 19:14, let the little children come to me. Don't stop them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to those who are like these children. Throughout the last 2 years, our country and community have been devastated with the riots and fighting and destruction of property over the issue of racial equality. Josie's second text is Acts 17:26. This is the English Standard Version. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. Just think about what difference it would make in the past 2 years in our communities and in our country if everyone understood Joseph's second text. There is only one race, the human race. By the grace of God, he created Adam. Adam was the first man, and that's where we all came from. It is my prayer that as I have shared all these, sorry that it's a little long, but considering there were 7 preachers, I hope you forgive me. But it's my prayer that you were blessed, just as I was blessed. So, do you mind if Brent plays the song that I was talking about?
No, I'd like to hear it.
sermon in shoes.
Amen.
But